120-volt terminations. 120-volt receptacles. The term receptacle actually covers all types of applications, whether they are light fixtures or wall outlets. Every habitable space in the home is required to meet minimum standards of power and lighting availability. Never install a fully switched receptacle inside a room where both the top and bottom of the duplex are controlled by a switch. A switched receptacle may be acceptable to meet the code, or a receptacle may be used to meet the lighting outlet requirement in rooms other than bathrooms and kitchens. However, it may not meet the code requirements for wall spacing. In this section, we look at some of the common standards for outlets around the home and some methods for inspecting them. Many older homes, however, will not have what would now be the required number of outlets. This would not necessarily be a defect, but the home inspector would be well advised to point out to the homeowner or home buyer that there may not be enough outlets to suit a modern family's needs. Homes with many appliances connected through extension cords are typical of properties built with insufficient outlets. Habitable spaces. All habitable spaces are required to have electrical power, and in new construction, one would expect to see an outlet at every 12 feet of wall space. Even hallways longer than 10 feet are required to have power. Floor-mounted receptacles. Standard wall-type receptacles pose a danger when mounted horizontally in a floor structure. Dirt, dust, and any spilled water will affect the outlet. Plus, children or pets will always play with anything on the floor. Recommend upgrading floor receptacles to the approved type with special covers. Service locations. Any unfinished space that houses serviceable equipment such as furnaces and air handlers is required to have not only a light, but also a power outlet. This includes attics and crawl space. Kitchen circuits. All kitchens are required to be supplied with two 20-amp circuits over and above any requirements for dedicated outlets for stoves, etc. These circuits should not serve any lighting circuits. One of these branch circuits should be used for small appliance receptacles no more than 20 inches above the countertop. These outlets must also be GFCI protected. The minimum two 20-amp circuits shall both supply receptacles serving the countertop space. All kitchen counter receptacles installed in new construction are required to be GFCI protected. All counter spaces wider than 12 inches should have an outlet, and the maximum distance between outlets should be no more than 4 feet. There should also be a receptacle within 2 feet each end of the counter ends and from any break in the countertop, such as for a range, refrigerator, and sinks. Islands and peninsulas are also required to have at least one receptacle to serve the countertop space. If the space is not available on the countertop area, the NEC allows the receptacle to be installed below the countertop surface, which must not be more than 12 inches below the countertop and not installed under any overhang 6 inches or more from the base of the island or peninsula to the edge of the overhang. No countertop outlets are allowed to be installed face up on the horizontal surface. When dealing with the space behind a corner-mounted sink or counter-mounted cooking unit, the 2008 NEC requires that if such space is less than 18 inches, it is not considered a wall space. If that space is 18 inches or more, must meet the same spacing requirements previously discussed. A countertop with an extended face sink or a counter-mounted cooking unit, such as when that counter sticks out and creates a space behind the sink or cooking unit, is not considered counter space if that space is less than 12 inches. If that space is 12 inches or more, then that space must meet the same spacing requirements as previously discussed. When dealing with islands and peninsulas, the 2008 NEC requires that where a range, counter-mounted cooking unit, or sink is installed in an island or peninsular countertop, and the width of the countertop behind the range, counter-mounted cooking unit, or sink is less than 12 inches, the range, counter-mounted cooking unit, or sink is considered to divide the countertop space into two separate countertop spaces. This would mean both sides would need a receptacle to meet current codes. Most jurisdictions require dishwashers and waste disposals to be on dedicated circuits. Often, refrigerators are plugged into dedicated outlets, which is allowed by the NEC to prevent nuisance tripping from installed GFCIs. Bathroom circuits. Outlets should be on dedicated 20-amp GFCI protected circuits, and at least one receptacle is required to be installed within 3 feet of any vanity basin. The home inspector is justified in suggesting that non-GFCI receptacles in older bathrooms should be upgraded for safety reasons. There is also a common misconception that no switches or receptacles may be installed within 3 feet of a bath or shower enclosure. This is correct for Canada, but not a requirement in the United States. Laundry rooms. There must be a minimum of one 20-amp circuit within 6 feet of the appliance location. Dryer outlets should have a 4-wire 30-amp minimum supply. Garage receptacles. All receptacles in the garage are required to have GFCI protection. Adequate lighting is also required. The only exceptions that may be permitted by the local code are for fire alarm and burglar alarm systems, and receptacles outside installed for roof snow melting equipment. Exterior receptacles. Newer homes are required to have a minimum of 1 outlet at the front and another at the rear. These receptacles are required to be weather-tight while in use and GFCI protected. Recommend upgrading the older receptacles as this is a safety enhancement that should be considered. Non-GFCI outlets may be allowed by the local code standard for dedicated single outlets only, such as one will find supplying heater strips in colder climates. Visual inspection. According to the InterNACHI Home Inspection Standards of Practice, the home inspector should inspect a representative number of switches, lighting fixtures, and receptacles, including the receptacles observed and deemed to be arc fault circuit interrupter or AFCI protected, using the AFCI test button where possible. The inspector should inspect all ground fault circuit interrupter receptacles and circuit breakers observed and deemed to be GFCIs using a GFCI tester where possible. The inspector should report the following: 2-wire-only circuits, damaged or missing cover plates, missing screws, damaged receptacles, signs of overheating on receptacles or surrounding walls, and lack of GFCIs and AFCIs.